My name is Brooke, and I'm 52 years old. I've been married to Derek for 28 years, and for most of that time, I believed we had built something solid. We live in a comfortable suburb of Portland, Oregon, where the rain taps gently against our windows most of the year. Our two children, Emma and Lucas, have grown up and moved out, leaving Derek and me in a quiet house that sometimes feels too big. Derek works as an architect at a prestigious firm downtown. I teach English at a local community college, a job that allowed me to be home when the kids needed me. It was a good life, but somewhere along the way, I stopped prioritizing the things that made me feel like myself. My French books gathered dust on the shelves. My dreams of traveling back to France remained just dreams. Derek knew I had studied French in graduate school. I was fluent, passionate about the language. But after so many years of me not speaking it, I think he simply forgot. That's the thing about long marriages. You can know someone intimately and still overlook parts of who they are. Everything changed 3 months ago when Derek's firm hired Celeste, a senior designer from Paris. Derek mentioned her casually at first, but soon her name appeared constantly in his conversations. Celeste suggested a new approach to the waterfront project, he'd say. Celeste and I stayed late working on the proposal. I noticed something shifting in him. He seemed more energized, dressed better for work, checked his phone constantly with a small smile I didn't recognize. One evening, Derek told me he'd be attending a conference in Seattle. Celeste will be there too, he added, almost as an afterthought. The way he said her name made my stomach tighten, but I pushed the feeling aside. I trusted Derek. We had built a life together. When he returned from Seattle, he seemed different, lighter somehow, as if he'd shed some invisible weight. That night, lying beside him in the darkness, I felt like there was an ocean between us. The following weeks brought more changes. Long lunch meetings, coming home smelling faintly of expensive perfume. One evening, I walked into his home office and found him on a video call, speaking in what sounded like French. When he noticed me, he quickly switched to English. Just practicing with Celeste, he explained with a casual smile. She's been teaching me some basic phrases. I nodded, but my heart was pounding. French, the language that had once meant everything to me, now becoming a secret code between my husband and another woman. 2 weeks ago, Derek told me about an important client dinner at La Maison Blanche, an upscale French restaurant downtown. It's this Thursday, just some of us from the firm and the Beaumont Group representatives. Something in my gut told me this was the moment I needed to see for myself. I called my friend Patricia. Can you meet me at La Maison Blanche tonight? I'll explain everything when I see you. That evening, I dressed carefully in a navy dress Derek had always complimented. Patricia met me outside at 7:30, and we requested a table in the back with a good view of the dining room. My heart was racing as I scanned the room, and then I saw them. Derek and Celeste sat at a corner table, intimate and secluded, with no other colleagues in sight. She was beautiful, dark hair perfectly styled, elegant features, and Derek was looking at her the way he used to look at me decades ago. I watched them share wine, lean close in conversation, laugh together. Then Derek glanced around and began speaking to Celeste in French. Even from a distance, I could tell he was trying to impress her. Their body language told me everything. The way his hand rested near hers, the way she touched her neck when she smiled. At one point, Derek reached across and briefly covered her hand with his own. It was just a moment, but to me, it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Patricia kept up quiet conversation, but I couldn't look away. Around 9, they stood to leave, and I watched Derek place his hand on the small of Celeste's back, a gesture so familiar, so intimate, that it took my breath away. That night, Derek came home around 11, claiming the dinner had run late. As I listened to him shower, I felt something crystallizing inside me. It wasn't just anger or hurt, it was determination. I wasn't going to confront him with tears and accusations. I was going to gather information, understand exactly what was happening, and then decide from a position of strength. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my old French textbooks and novels. I dusted them off and began reading. The language came back quickly. The grammar, the vocabulary, the rhythm of the sentences. Over the next several days, I dedicated myself to relearning French with intensity. I watched French films. I listened to podcasts. I joined an online conversation group. Derek continued his pattern. More late nights, more work dinners, more phone calls in French that he thought I couldn't understand. One evening, about a week after the restaurant incident, I overheard him on the phone in his office. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, as I listened to him speak French to Celeste. My French had improved enough that I understood most of it. He was complaining about me, about how I'd become boring over the years, how we'd lost our connection, how I didn't understand his need for intellectual stimulation. He said I'd let myself go, that I'd become just a mother and teacher rather than the interesting woman he'd married. Each word felt like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stay calm and keep listening. Celeste agreed with him, telling him he deserved better, that he deserved to feel alive and passionate. The conversation ended with Derek saying he'd see her tomorrow, his voice warm and intimate, the way he used to speak to me. I walked back to the kitchen, my mind racing. Part of me felt devastated, but another part, a part I'd forgotten existed, felt awakened. Derek thought I was boring? That I'd let myself go? He had no idea who I really was anymore. And neither, I realized, did I. That weekend, I went shopping at boutiques downtown. I bought clothes that made me feel beautiful and sophisticated. I got my hair cut and colored, covering the gray and adding highlights. I even treated myself to a professional makeup consultation. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I hadn't seen in years, confident, attractive, vibrant. On Monday, I reached out to Dr. Margaret Chen, a colleague who had become the head of the language department at Portland State University. We'd worked together years ago, and she'd always encouraged me to pursue opportunities in higher education. "Brooke, it's been too long," she said when I called. "I'm ready for a change," I told her. "Are there any openings in your department?" Margaret invited me to lunch. Over salads, we talked about possibilities. The university was looking for someone to teach advanced French conversation courses. "Your background would be perfect," Margaret said enthusiastically. "You're overqualified for where you've been. I've always wondered why you didn't pursue something more challenging." I thought about her question as I drove home. Why hadn't I? Because I'd made choices based on what seemed best for my family. Because Derek's career had taken priority. Because somewhere along the way, I'd stopped believing I deserved more, but I was starting to believe it again. That evening, Derek came home late, barely looking at me as he microwaved leftovers. "Celeste and I are working on a major pitch for Thursday," he said, scrolling through his phone. "It's consuming everything right now." "She seems very dedicated," I commented. "She is. It's refreshing to work with someone so passionate and committed. She reminds me of how I used to be before everything became so routine." The implied criticism hung in the air. "Before you became routine," he meant. The next day, I had my interview at Portland State. I wore one of my new outfits, a sophisticated burgundy suit. The interview went beautifully. I demonstrated my fluency, discussed pedagogical approaches, shared my vision for engaging language instruction. "We'd love to have you join us," Margaret said at the end. "Can you start at the beginning of next term? That's just 6 weeks away." I thought about Derek, about our marriage, about the choice I was facing. Then I thought about the woman I'd seen in the mirror recently, the woman who deserved to pursue her passions. "Yes," I said firmly. "I can start then." That evening, Derek mentioned another work dinner on Friday night, supposedly a celebration for landing a new client. I suspected the truth would be different. I spent the week preparing, practicing my French daily, making sure I was completely fluent again. I also documented Derek's late nights and suspicious behavior. On Friday evening, Derek left for his celebration dinner, dressed impeccably in new cologne I didn't recognize. After giving him a 30-minute head start, I got ready. I wore a stunning deep blue dress, elegant and sophisticated. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. And that was exactly the point. I drove to La Maison Blanche and requested a table in the main dining area with a clear view of the restaurant. I immediately spotted Derek and Celeste at their intimate corner table. No colleagues, no client celebration, just the two of them. This time, I didn't hide. I sat close enough to hear them clearly. After a few minutes, they switched to French. Derek spoke in his awkward, heavily accented French, trying to impress Celeste. "Tu es si belle ce soir," he said. "You are so beautiful tonight." Celeste smiled indulgently. "Ton français s'améliore. Your French is improving." Then Derek said something that made my hands tighten around my wine glass. "Ma femme ne me comprend plus. Elle est devenue si ennuyeuse. My wife doesn't understand me anymore. She has become so boring." They continued talking, Derek sharing intimate details about our marriage, about me, about how he felt trapped. Celeste encouraged him. telling him he should follow his heart, that life was too short to stay in an unfulfilling relationship. After 20 minutes, Derek made a comment that was clearly meant as a joke at my expense. Ma femme pense que je travaille ce soir. Elle ne sait rien. My wife thinks I'm working tonight. She knows nothing. Celeste laughed, touching Derek's hand. C'est parfait. It's perfect. That was when I decided I'd heard enough. I stood up, straightened my dress, and walked directly to their table. Derek's back was to me, so he didn't see me approaching, but Celeste did. Her eyes widened with surprise and alarm. Bonsoir, I said pleasantly in French. Good evening. Derek's head whipped around, his face going pale. Brooke, how did you? I continued in French, my pronunciation perfect, my voice calm and steady. J'ai tout compris, Derek. Chaque mot de votre petite conversation. I understood everything. Every word of your little conversation. The color drained from Derek's face. Celeste looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Other diners had started to notice. Tu parles français? Derek stammered. You speak French? Depuis quand? Since when? Depuis toujours. I replied smoothly. Always. Je suis professeur de français, Derek. Où avais-tu oublié? J'ai fait une maîtrise en linguistique avec spécialisation en français. C'était ma passion avant que je ne devienne ennuyeuse. I'm a French professor, Derek. Or had you forgotten? I did a master's in linguistics with a specialization in French. It was my passion before I became boring. Celeste stood up abruptly. Je pense que je devrais partir. I think I should leave. Non, restez, I told her. No, stay. Then I switched to English, looking directly at Derek. Actually, you both should stay. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy discussing how boring I am. Enjoy making plans for Derek's exciting new life. Brooke, please, Derek said, reaching for my arm. This isn't what it looks like. I pulled away. It's exactly what it looks like. And the truly sad part is that I had to discover it by listening to you mock me in a language you thought I didn't understand. I didn't mean those things, he protested weakly. By degrading me? By sharing intimate details about our marriage? I gestured towards Celeste. By planning your escape from the boring life I represent? Tears threatened, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of them. For 28 years, I supported you. I continued steadily. I put my career on hold so you could pursue yours. I raised our children while you worked late. I made our house a home and asked for very little in return. And yes, maybe I did become boring. Maybe I did lose myself. But you know what, Derek? That was partly your fault too. You stopped seeing me as anything other than a wife and mother. That's not fair, Derek said. You're the one who changed. You stopped caring about anything outside of this house and your part-time teaching job. His words stung because there was truth in them. But I had changed for us, for our family. You're right, I said quietly. I did change, but I'm changing again, Derek. I've accepted a position at Portland State University, teaching advanced French. I'm going back to doing what I love, being who I really am. The question is, will there be room for you in that life? I didn't wait for his answer. I turned and walked out with my head held high, leaving Derek and Celeste in stunned silence. The drive home was a blur. When I pulled into our driveway, I sat in the car for several minutes, hands shaking. The confrontation had been empowering, but now reality was crashing down. My marriage was falling apart. I went inside, changed into comfortable clothes, made tea, and sat in the living room waiting. Derek arrived about an hour later, looking haggard. We need to talk, he said. Yes, we do. For the next 2 hours, we had the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Derek admitted he'd been feeling disconnected from our marriage for a long time. He felt like we'd become roommates rather than partners. But that doesn't excuse what you did, I told him firmly. If you were unhappy, you should have talked to me. We could have gone to counseling. Instead, you found someone else to make you feel alive again. I know, he said, dropping his head into his hands. But Brooke, you have to understand. I felt invisible to you too. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you seemed interested in my work, my dreams? His words forced me to examine my own role. When had I stopped asking about his day beyond pleasantries? When had I stopped sharing my own thoughts? We had both retreated into separate worlds. So, what do we do now? I asked. I don't know. Do you want a divorce? The question hung in the air. Did I? A few hours ago, I might have said yes, but now, I realized it wasn't that simple. I don't know either, I admitted. What I do know is that I'm not going to beg you to stay. I'm not going to compete with Celeste for your attention. I've spent too many years making myself smaller, and I'm done. I'm taking the job at Portland State. I'm pursuing my passions again. And if you can't accept that, if you can't see me as a partner rather than just a wife and mother, then maybe we don't have a future. What about us? Derek asked. Is there any chance we could fix this? Maybe, but it would take real work from both of us, and you'd have to end whatever you have with Celeste, completely. It wasn't an affair, Derek protested. It was an emotional affair, Derek. Don't insult me. He nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. I'll end it with Celeste. I'll be completely professional with her at work. And we need counseling, I added. If we're going to try to save this marriage, we need professional help. Okay, Derek agreed. I'll find someone next week. Over the following weeks, Derek ended his relationship with Celeste. We started seeing a marriage counselor named Dr. Reeves, a no-nonsense woman who didn't let either of us off easy. In our sessions, we explored how we'd both contributed to the breakdown. Derek had sought validation outside our relationship instead of addressing problems. I had retreated into routine instead of pushing for more. But we also discovered things that gave me hope. We still cared about each other. We still had shared history, and we both wanted to be better. I started my position at Portland State, and it was like coming home to myself. Teaching advanced French conversation to engaged students was intellectually stimulating in a way I'd forgotten was possible. I felt valued, challenged, respected. Derek noticed the change. You're different, he said one evening. You seem alive again. I feel alive, I admitted. I'd forgotten what it felt like to pursue something I'm passionate about. I'm sorry I didn't encourage that before, he said quietly. I got so focused on my own career that I didn't see how much you'd sacrificed. Our marriage didn't heal overnight. There were setbacks and difficult conversations, but slowly, we started rebuilding. We went on actual dates where we talked and reconnected. We took a French cooking class together, laughing at our clumsy attempts. We planned a trip to France for the following summer. Derek made real efforts to see me as a whole person again. He asked about my students, my curriculum, my thoughts on French literature. He read a novel I'd assigned so we could discuss it together. And I made efforts too. I asked about his projects with genuine interest. I visited his office to see his work. I remembered that the man I'd married was creative and passionate. 3 months after the confrontation at La Maison Blanche, we had a breakthrough in Dr. Reeves's office discussing trust. Trust isn't rebuilt in a day, Dr. Reeves said. It's rebuilt through consistent, honest action over time. I want to trust him again, I said, looking at Derek. But I need to know that you see me, really see me, not just as your wife or mother of your children, but as Brooke, a woman with her own dreams and identity. I do see you, Derek said earnestly, and I'm sorry it took almost losing you to open my eyes. You're brilliant and interesting and so much more than I gave you credit for. That evening, we cooked dinner together, something we hadn't done in years. As we chopped vegetables and stirred sauce, talking and laughing, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. 6 months after that night at the restaurant, Derek and I were still working on our marriage. Some days were good, full of connection and progress. Other days were hard, with old resentment surfacing. But I was different now. I had rediscovered who I was beyond being Derek's wife. I had work I loved, colleagues who respected me, and a sense of purpose that didn't depend on anyone else. Whether my marriage survived or not, I would be okay. One afternoon, I was in my office at Portland State when Emma called from Seattle. "Mom," she said, her voice warm and proud, "I just wanted to tell you how amazing you are. Dad told me about what happened. I'm so impressed by how you've rebuilt yourself and your career. You're my hero." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know. You've taught me something important," Emma continued, "that it's never too late to reclaim yourself, to pursue your dreams." After we hung up, I sat looking out my office window at the campus below. Students were walking between classes, full of potential and possibility, and I realized I felt the same way. At 52, my life wasn't over. It was just beginning a new chapter. That evening, I taught my advanced conversation class on French cinema. My students were engaged and enthusiastic. As I listened to them speak, I felt profound satisfaction. After class, Derek called. "I'm cooking dinner tonight. Nothing fancy, just pasta." but I wanted us to eat together, talk about our days. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. As I drove home through the Portland rain, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, invisible, diminished, living in the margins of her own life. And I thought about who I was now, visible, confident, pursuing my passions. The confrontation at La Maison Blanche had been painful, but it had also been necessary. It had forced both Derek and me to see what our marriage had become and decide whether we wanted to fight for something better. We were still fighting, and I still didn't know if we'd make it, but I did know that I'd found myself again, and that was worth everything. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw Derek through the kitchen window, moving around as he prepared dinner. I took a deep breath, grabbed my bag, and walked inside. "Bonsoir," I called out, smiling as I entered the kitchen. Derek turned and smiled back. "Bonsoir, ma belle. Comment était ta journée?" "Good evening, beautiful. How was your day?" His French accent was still terrible, but he was trying. And maybe that was what mattered most. Not perfection, but effort. Not the absence of mistakes, but the willingness to keep trying despite them. "Ma journée était magnifique," I replied, joining him in the kitchen. My day was wonderful, and it was. Whatever the future held for Derek and me, I knew I would face it as myself, fully, authentically, unapologetically myself, and that was enough.